So what's up? So what's up, guys? Adip here, back with a new video. So today we're talking about the camera settings that I use when I'm shooting a B-roll video or a cinematic video. So without wasting time, let's get into it. So the first setting that I'm suggesting, and I think everyone should adapt to it, is switch on the manual mode. I'm not talking about the manual autofocus or anything. I'm talking about switching on to the manual mode. The reason I told you to go into manual mode is because to exposure lock all the settings of your camera so that the exposure doesn't fluctuate anymore. So now that you are in manual mode, you have to remember three things. The first is aperture, the F thing on your camera, the next is ISO, and the next is shutter speed. So whenever I start shooting, the first thing I set is my shutter speed, because shutter speed is responsible for your jittery or flickering in the video. Before you set the shutter speed, I would like you to take a look what is FPS. FPS is frames by second. So right now in this situation, if I'm shooting, I'll be shooting on 50 FPS. So according to 50 FPS, the shutter speed should be double the FPS. So if I'm shooting 50 FPS, the shutter speed should be 1 by 100. That's how you should shoot with it. So if I'm shooting 100 FPS, then the shutter speed should be 1 by 200. So actually what I'm trying to say is shutter speed is equal to 1 by 2 of your FPS. So that is the main rule of shooting with a proper FPS and a shutter speed. So the most important thing is people talk about 24 FPS is the best thing to shoot cinematic on, but I do it the another way. I always shoot on 60 FPS because that gives me the flexibility in the post to slow it down. Yeah, so it's actually better if you want a slow motion rather than using a 24 FPS and then slow it down the post. That gives you more jittery movement. So I use 60 FPS as my shooting mechanism, and then in the post I slow it down. Actually what I'm trying to say is जो हमारी जो clip है वो 1 minute की है, वो फिर मैं 1 minute 14 seconds 15 seconds तक ऐसे वो split कर सकता हूँ. So aperture can be selected on basis of two things. First of all is the blur effect, that is also known as depth of field. If you want more blur effect in your video, you will probably use lower F number so that it can give you more blur. And if you want everything in right focus, then you might be using the F number at a higher regulation, and that will give you more area in focus. And the second is the amount of light environment you're shooting in. For an example, if you're shooting in a low light situation, you'll probably use the F number at a lower rate. And if you are in a well lit situation, you will be using the F number at a higher rate. Now that we have talked about and set our aperture and shutter speed, let's talk about the main thing, that is ISO. ISO is that thing that can make your footage or it's gonna break your footage. If you're sitting in an extreme low light condition, I will suggest you to go with a higher ISO. But going with the higher ISO, you can see that grain on your footage that really doesn't look good. Other than that, ISO can also overexpose your footage. Just like in this sample footage, the ISO it just blows out the whole video. Then you might just consider taking the ISO all the way down to around 100 or 300. So that will give you a natural light on your face as well. So these are some minor things that you have to take in consideration when you're shooting a cinematic video. Yes, most of the time you can see this background blur. I use that with the f aperture of 3.5. It's dependent on your lens. If your lens is able to shoot at f1.4, the more background blur you're gonna get. f1.4 is mainly you'll be able to see on 50mm lens on every camera. So yes, mostly I use this background blur on if I'm talking to camera. Other than that, if I want to actually focus on something, on a particular object or subject in the B-roll, I use f3.5. If not, then I use somewhere around f14 to f15, so that my image doesn't look that dark if I go up to f22. So yes, and it's in a sweet spot. And I also take a look at the ISO range. Mostly I prefer going to 100 to 300. That is a sweet spot when you're shooting in a well lit situation. If not, I try avoiding shooting at dark these days, because my camera doesn't have that ability to go full blown out ISO, and then you get that grainy footage. So I'll always recommend you use external lights to lit up the environment, so that you can color grade into day to night. Lastly, it is up to you if you want to shoot in 24 fps or 60 fps, or the camera has even 120 fps. It's all on you how you have to shoot. I usually shoot on 60 fps and then slow it down the post. So that's how are all my camera settings. I hope you learned something from this video, and I'll see you guys with another one. I'll see you soon. Bye.